Let's navigate back to the inventory. There's all kind of different controls in the inventory. So let me show you. So let me resize it a little bit. There we go. So you have checkboxes. So if you select one of these checkboxes, you're going to get context-based buttons at the top. So maybe you want to change the base URL for one of these APIs. Maybe you want to check reachability. Maybe you want to exclude APIs from being tested, and so on. So you have all these controls. Our goal is not to do that. By the way, the same similar controls, if I uncheck it, appear all the way to the right under the Actions button. Right? So you have the check reachability, you have the exclude API. The only thing you don't have is updating the base URL. That you can only do by selecting the APIs you're interested in and then selecting the edit base URL. Okay. There's additional controls in this inventory. For example, you have this red dots, unreachable. Okay, and I would like to start working with this post users API. So we're going to establish reachability from these post users. But now if I select this unreachable, I'm going to be given the reasons why we failed, right? And it says, in fact, you're getting a warning, right? You're being told an error occurred. This API is marked as unreachable since active testing didn't successfully consume it. That means it didn't send a successful, it didn't process, the API didn't process a successful response. And you're also being told, make sure you configure, make sure you fix the request resolving through the request editor. We're going to get to see the request editor in a second. Or maybe you would like to turn on the reachability optimizer. These are just cookie cutter suggestions, right? We know the reachability optimizer, it's turned on for us. The other thing you will see is that you have all the different dependencies. In this case, the post user doesn't have any other API that it depends upon. So that's why you see a single entry. And then you see the request. Here's the request, John Doe, and here's the response. Now the question, if I had an audience in the class, I will be asking a question. I go, why is this request failing? We already seen how post users behave, right? We already seen how post users behave. And it should be fairly straightforward if you remember, right? If you were paying attention, that it fails because the user, John Doe, already exists. So the reachability timeline is going to give you all the details you need to identify why your specific request failed, why reachability failed. You're going to have some of the suggestions right here. And then you're going to have something I haven't mentioned yet. You're going to have which authentication was used in order to establish reachability, or which authentication had been used, right? No authentication because we haven't yet set up an authentication. Okay. Reachability timeline is great because it gives us all the information we need. Now, if you select anywhere in the row but the check mark, the red dot, and the actions, you're going to get now a different page. Let's select it. Again, we're selecting the row post users. This is your request editor. Actually contains more information, contains information about your API specifically, any issues that have been triggered, and here's the request editor all the way to the bottom. It is at this level that you're able now to configure the way you would like the request to be generated so that you're able to establish reachability. Not only that, you're given a quote-unquote debugging tool because you're able to send requests directly. So if I send a request, let me go back to my terminal. Let me clean it up a little bit. Right, and I'm going to send a request. Send. Here it is. And this time that I send the request, I see the exact error. Why it failed? Unique constraint violation, right? Because the user already exists. So I know that my problem right now is this John. And in fact, you have another view timeline. You have another view timeline up here. So if I select the view timeline, it's going to give you another instance of that reachability timeline. This time with this request that you sent from within the request editor. It's the same exact thing. John Doe, right? There's a couple of things that are of interest to us. The ID is skipped, the role is skipped. Why they're skipped? Because they're marked as optional in our OpenAPI specification. That's why the ID and the role are skipped. The username John is our problem. John, password, Doe, email, and the application, they're all static values. But you have choices. If you select the pull-down menu, you have dependency, you have faker, you have static, and you have a skip. Static is just a static value, string John. I can come in here and change it to George or any other name. And I'm going to be able to get this passed once. Never again. So ideally, what you want to do is you want to use a faker in this particular case. So let's select faker. You're being asked, okay, what type of faker do you want to create? String, number, boolean? String is what we want. There's two types of fakers. Faker.js, Postman random. I prefer Faker.js because it's succinct. It doesn't have the number of choices that Postman random has. This is a little bit more manageable. And if you select now the format of the faker value you want to generate, we're going to select any. Why? Because any generates usernames. Right? You can specify a regular expression if you so choose, a color, a date, and UIDs and so on, passwords, etc. Any is what I'm going to select. And I can even specify a minimum and a maximum. If I know these minimums and maximums are enforced at my application level, and I can tell you right now that this application, the flights application, doesn't enforce anything, so I'm going to keep it empty. I'm going to select submit. Pay attention what's going to happen to the value John, right? Submit. Well, now it's automatically generated. Willa Stanton. I can do the same thing for the password, but I choose not to. Why? Because a password with 3 characters signifies something to active testing. If I specify in my tool in active testing a more appropriate password, then I may miss information. I can change the email. I don't have to, but I can. So I'm going to go to static. We're going to switch it to faker. Faker.js yet again. And we're going to select email. And we're going to submit. And here's now the corresponding email. And every time you submit, look, different values get generated. Different values get generated. Let's send. Let's see whether we're able to successfully create a user. Send. Success. Pay attention to what happened, though. Pay attention to what happened. Remember, the very first call is the one with John Doe. The last 3 are the ones we're interested in currently. Here's the first. The very first user that we send an email with, we send the request, not an email, we send the request was Beverly Mant. The second one was with Alana98. The third one, we received a unique constraint violation. What the heck is going on? Why 3 requests? The first one is required by the reachability optimizer. Think of it as being the warm-up. The second one is what is used to establish reachability. And the third one tries to repeat the same exact request in order to identify whether these type of requests are repeatable. So reachability, this. Last 2. First one by the reachability optimizer, the warm-up, and then the last 2 is what actually establishes reachability. And actually you can see that is the second one, Alana98. Remember this name, right? Because if I go now to the view timeline, I'm going to see Alana98. That's how I know it's a second one that is used to establish reachability. And by the way, I'm seeing it as being reachable. No authentication, right? Green dot. You're not done, though. You're not done. If you navigate away from this page, all the changes you just performed, they will be removed. The changes you perform are transient in this request editor unless you press these publish changes. So there's an extra step that I keep forgetting myself. But this step is necessary if you would like to save all the changes you just performed. So let's click Publish Changes, please. Click this Publish Changes. Now you successfully saved the request override you just configured. Now they're saved. Now we can navigate away and we can either select the inventory page again. We can click the inventory breadcrumb link. It's up to you. Pick one, select it. Now you will see that the post users now has a yellow dot indicating that it's not available yet. Right? So I'm going to clean up again house and I'm going to check it and I'm going to check reachability. And I'm going to go back to my terminal. The first request, 404. This is, you will see it all the time when you first run a scan or when you check reachability from the inventory page, not the request editor, the inventory page. And it's a test, it's a quick test that active testing performs in order to establish that yes, this is accessible, this server is accessible. The 404 is more than enough for anybody to understand that something is accessible, right? The server is accessible. Then we run the post user. The very first request is for that warm up to the reachability optimizer. The second request is where the reachability is established. And the third request is where we repeat the same exact request to see if it's repeatable. And of course, if it's repeatable, that gives additional insights to active testing. Okay, here it is. And in our case, it's not repeatable. It's not repeatable because you get 400. Okay, keep that in mind. You will see tons of these different requests. And as soon as we start introducing authentications, you're going to get to see more and more different requests because the authentications are being used, are being tested against your APIs. With this, my good people, we have established the reachability for our post users. And with this, we have concluded this section of our walkthrough.